Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kim Schmidt, Executive Editor of Rural Lifestyle Dealer Magazine. Welcome to our latest webinar, Preparing for the Slow Season. Today's presenter is Sara Hey, Vice President of Business Development and speaker for Bob Clement International. She speaks at conferences across the country in the United Kingdom, helping dealers achieve success in their dealership by implementing processes and utilizing their people to their maximum potential. Before we get started with the presentation, just a couple housekeeping items. On your screen, there's a control panel with a Q&A icon. You can submit questions here at any time during the presentation, and time permitting, we'll try to answer as many of those as possible. And then if for any reason your internet connection drops and it seems like the webinar has been interrupted, just go back to your email that you received earlier telling you how to join the webinar, and you can re-enter that way. All right, we are ready to get started. Thanks again for joining us, and take it away, Sara.
Thank you, Kim. You know, every time that we have the opportunity to partner with you and your team at Rural Lifestyle Dealer, we always just have the greatest time. And I know that we are able to bring some really great content, not only through your magazine, your digital publication, but through these webinars to dealers across the country, which is what we are about. So as Kim said, my name is Sara Hey. I'm with Bob Clement International. If you're not familiar with our organization, what we are is we are a training company for dealerships across the country. When you think about us, the easiest way to understand what we do is we are the Gordon Ramsay of kitchen nightmares for your dealership. That's right. But we do realize that when we come in and help a dealership turn around from this place of struggling with parts and service and whole goods to being actually profitable, we've got to be a lot nicer to the technicians than Chef Ramsay is to chefs, because it's clearly easier to find chefs than it is to technicians. So that's what we do. We work with about 5,000 dealerships across the country, across different sectors, to help them be profitable and achieve success. And so as we were getting ready for today, and as I was having conversations with the team at Rural Lifestyle Dealer, Kim and her team said, Sara, what is it right now in the world that dealerships could use? What is that information that you could bring to these dealers to help them be successful as we move into this next season of the year? Because I don't know if you're like most of the dealers that we are working with, but the beginning of 2020 is what some may call a dumpster fire. That's what we may call it. Listen, we are straight shooters here, and so we'll just call it what it is. The beginning of 2020 was a dumpster fire, but the thing that was so strange and unusual about the beginning of 2020 is this, is that as we went into the beginning of 2020, we first came out of January, February, we're like, we have the greatest year in the world. We're ready for 2020. We can't wait to knock it out of the park. Then March hit. March hit, and everybody goes, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? There was this like mass panic that happened, and rightfully so. But now that we've gotten through season, and now that most of the dealers around the country, regardless of what they're selling, have come through, they look back on this and they go, holy smokes, in my wildest dreams, I could not have imagined it going so well. I couldn't have imagined it. It's not only dealers, but manufacturers. They go, how in the world did we get to this place where we are in this industry that not only didn't succumb to what was happening, but we are going and we are thriving in a result of this. And so it brings this really interesting dynamic into play as we move forward right now. And so as we were having these conversations, Kim and I and the team at Rural Lifestyle Dealer had this conversation. We said, what is it that we can do? And I said, you know, I think, Kim, the thing that we can do right now more than ever, is help the dealers, our dealers we work with, all 5,000 of you, prepare for the slow season ahead. We all just were like holding on for dear life, going, bless the Lord, let's see what happens. But now we're ready, and we're saying, okay, we know without a shadow of a doubt that slow season is going to come. And so as a dealer, it is up to you to say, how am I going to take what I know that happened at the beginning of this year and take it as a catapult so that we can move into 2020 in a way, through the rest of 2020, that we are in this place that we have certainty inside of our dealerships. You know, so as we think about this, and as our team has been talking at BCI, we have seen that there has been one overarching emotion for dealers across the country in 2020. And I touched on this just a second ago, but our overarching emotion that we've seen is, despite that it's probably been the best year ever for 90% of the dealers we work with across the country, best year ever, the one overarching emotion is uncertainty. You're saying, how in the world do I know how to jump through all of these hoops that are in front of me right now? I have uncertainty about inventory coming in. I have uncertainty about what procedures and protocols I need to follow. I have uncertainty about what fall will have ahead of us. I have uncertainty if my PPP loan is going to be forgiven. I have all of this uncertainty. And I know that I'm getting ready to go into what's typically my slower time of the year. How in the world do I actually set myself and my dealership up for success in a way that we are going to thrive as we go into the rest of this year? I get it. As a business owner or a business manager, you are having things coming at you in all directions. Your employees are coming to you and saying, what do we do going forward? Your manufacturers are coming to you and saying, listen, I need you to hold on and walk through this with me and just hang on with me because we're working on the inventory situation. I need you to hang on and make sure that we are going about this in the right way. You have the PPP situation and you're saying, okay, I know that the government's going to sooner or later release these guidelines, so I know what I can do, but there's just this overwhelming uncertainty in the midst of this, and it can feel almost overwhelming because you feel like it's coming at you from all over. So what do you do? How do you, as a business owner or manager, minimize this uncertainty that is happening not only inside your dealership, but outside of your dealership as well? Because it's up to you. Your people in the midst of uncertain times are looking to you as the owner or manager of your dealership to say, where should I be going and how should I be doing this? Well, here's the thing. In the midst of uncertain times, the way you minimize your uncertainty is two ways. This is it. This is what you do to minimize uncertainty. Number one, we've got to make sure that we have free cash. That's the first thing we've got to do. We've got to make sure if we want to minimize the uncertainty in our dealership right now as we move into this fall season where a crystal ball or shoot, even one of those like magic 8 balls that we all used to have would come in real handy. You go, better than what else I have right now. But if we want to minimize that, the first thing we're going to do is we've got to focus on freeing up cash. The second thing is we've got to focus on clarifying our processes. Listen, in the midst of uncertainty, cash is king. Cash flow is king in the midst of uncertainty, but not only that, when we've got the processes in our dealership so refined that it allows us to continue to move forward and push the envelope forward, it allows us to minimize this uncertainty. Let me tell you a quick story. We have a dealership that we have been working with for years and years. They have been in the dealership world as an outdoor power equipment dealer for probably close to 45 years now. So they have seen a lot of things happen in the dealership world. Now, about 3 years ago, this dealership, these owners, this husband and wife team, decided that they were going to take control of their business. They were going to take control of their business, and they put in the work. Like, they were the people who were sitting here going, I know that we can afford this, but we're not going to buy it because it's not necessary to our dealership moving forward right now. And so as a result, 3 years ago, this dealership decided that they were moving to a place of being debt-free. That's what they were going to do. They wanted to do this. This was their vision. This is where they were trying to go. So as they moved through these last 3 years, we just got a call from them recently in the last few weeks, and they said, you know what, we've got some big news to tell you. We just paid off our last floor plan, and we owe no money to anybody inside or outside of our dealership. We are a debt-free dealership. Do you know what amount of uncertainty pegs them right now? It's not as much as you if you're sitting here going, oh my gosh, I've got floor plans to take care of. I've got all of these different things that I've got to take care of, people I owe money to. If people stop coming into my dealership, they're going to be okay because they have 10 jobs, to make sure that number one, cash flow is king, and number two, that they have clarified the process. It's no different than when we were all kids and we were playing Jenga. Do you guys remember this? When we were kids playing Jenga, we would like build these towers. And as you got further and further into the game, it wasn't that things got more and more stable. No, things got more and more shaky because we got away from the base of what we were trying to do. So over the course of the next 40 minutes or so, here's what I want to do. I want to go through each department in your dealership, and I want to give you an applicable way to not only free up cash by that department, but also help you clarify the most important process right now. So that's how we're going to go about that. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the service department. Now, if you have been around our organization for any stretch of time, you know that we love the service department because the service department is the backbone of the dealership. The service department, when it is out of line or out of adjustment, everything else is off in the dealership as well. Now, we work with dealerships all around the world. We work with dealerships in the UK, here in the US, in Canada, Mexico, all over the world. And as we're working with them, we found one thing to be true. Regardless of where you are, regardless of what you sell, if the service department is not in a place of profitability with strong processes, everything else in the dealership feels like it is spinning out of control. Not long ago, I was over in the UK working with a group of dealers over there. And as I was having conversations with them, one thing that I saw over and over is they said, Sarah, it's so hard to get excited to come back into the dealership every day because for every hour we have that we're selling in the service department right now, we are losing money. Every single hour that they had technicians in the service department, they were losing money. And they said, you know what, we know this is insanity and we've got to figure out how to stop it. And I said, you're exactly right. That's exactly what you need to do because you are the one who can control this. You are the one who can say, stop the madness. Let's find ways to make this generate us cash, number one. But number two, let's make sure that our processes are airtight because in the midst of chaos costs you money, and in uncertainty breeds chaos. So we want to do everything we can as owners and managers by department to make sure that we minimize uncertainty because uncertainty causes chaos and chaos costs you money. All right, so that's when we've got to start. But with the service department, there are two things. The first thing we're going to talk about is our cash flow. We're going to talk about how we set up off-season service specials. And then as we talk about the processes side, we're specifically going to dive into how we triage equipment. But I think the thing we've got to understand and all come to agreement on before we dive into this is that if the service department is not at this place of profitability for your dealership, this is where I need you to start. Everything else doesn't matter. Well, it matters, but this is the most important thing because when your service department is right, it's fine-tuned, it is this ATM machine that will throw off $100 bills for your dealership all day long. All right, so let's start here. Let's start by saying, how do we, in the midst of this time right now, free up cash flow for our service department? You go, okay, that's great, Sarah. I'm real excited to hear this because I don't know, right now, my service department feels more like the black hole of hell that Satan himself will go into rather than an ATM machine throwing off $100 bills. Okay, I get it, but let's fix it. Let's fix it because you are the one who has control. So let's talk about one thing that you can be doing right now to make sure that we are generating revenue in the service department, and that is an off-season service special. Now, as we work with dealerships around the world, the off-season service special has been a really interesting thing to get up and going with the dealerships because this is a tool that does a few really important things for us. Our off-season service special, to put it simply, is a service special that we're going to do to our customers who have typically bought a piece of equipment from us, and we are going to do their annual service at a discounted rate. Okay, that's all it is in simple terms. Everything else is about how you market it. But at the end of the day, our off-season service special allows us as owners and managers to make sure that we have work coming through our service department all year long. And that's what we're trying to do. That's where we want to be with this. So when we talk about this, number one, we're looking at ways that it can generate us additional service revenue. I know that there are times in your dealership where you're like, okay, I've got 3 technicians, Sarah, and we've got no work coming in. How am I supposed to deal with that? How am I supposed to deal with that? How am I supposed to deal with this? Well, listen, if you've got 3 technicians, 3 technicians is where we can cost justify a service manager. You can't have a service manager cost neutral to your service department before you have 3 full-time technicians generating 85% efficiency. But as we think about it, your job as a service manager is to sell the inventory that you have in your service department. Your inventory in your service department is time. We track time in our service department by 1/10 of an hour. Every 6 minutes per technician is tracked in our service department. And so when we look at this off-season service special, what we're trying to do is saying, you as a service manager, you as a service writer, whatever your role it is, maybe you as the owner, what you're trying to do is sell the inventory that you have already bought. And we do that through this off-season service special. The other thing that this does is it produces a better customer experience. Think about it this way. I want you to think for just a minute about your busiest week of this last summer. Think about it. What was your busiest week of this last summer in your service department? In that moment, how far booked ahead were you in the service department? Were you 2 weeks, 3 weeks, more than 3 weeks, right? We use the term always when we're working with dealers, booked ahead. We're not booked back. No, we're booked ahead saying this is what we've already got this work coming through here for. But how far? When we have a winter service special or an off-season service special, depending on your product mix, we can create a better customer experience because our customers are bringing their equipment in before they actually need it. Because in your service department, people don't necessarily care about how much something costs. All they really care about is when can I have this back? That's what dictates a solid service experience. Not how much it costs necessarily. Now, I know some of you are on here like Sarah, you don't know my people. They do care how much it costs. Okay, they do when time is not an issue. But when we can get ahead of this and create this incredible customer experience, it allows us to keep this going all year long. And so that's a really important aspect of this for us too. Another thing it allows us to do is increase part sales. So when we sell an hour of service, we typically see for every dollar of service work we sell about 50% of parts to go with that. So the easiest way for us to increase our service revenue and our parts revenue at the same time is to increase service revenue. So I'm going to say that again. So I said that backwards. So the easiest way for us to increase parts revenue is to increase service revenue. So that's what we're focusing on. So when we implement an off-season service special, it allows us not only to increase the revenue in our service department, but our parts as well. The other thing that it does, which is so incredibly important for owners and managers of service departments, is it allows you to control the flow of work through your service department. I don't know any service manager that I've ever met who said, you know what, Sarah, I feel like my service department is a well-oiled machine and I never have any issues or red flags come up in it where people are needing something now in this instant to be taken care of. I get it. I get it. So what this allows you to do is that if we get an off-season service special chugging down the tracks for us, and that's what it will do, it allows us to regain control of the time in our service department, not only now, but when we move to our actual busy season, and it allows us to be more proactive in our time management versus reactive. So when we think about this off-season service special and how it continues to generate us cash, I think one important thing for us to realize before we dive into actually how we implement this is this. When you decide to start an off-season service special, it's going to take you 3 years to really get it up and running. You go, oh my gosh, there are 3 years. That sounds like an eternity. Listen, I want you to commit that 3 years from now, when things slow down, that you are going to have your service department so fine-tuned with an off-season service special that you are not even going to have to think about your credit line. Could you imagine the weight that would lift off your shoulders? If you were 3 years from now and you said, you know what, I walked through my whole entire slow season and I didn't once have to touch my credit line, Sarah. All right, that is winning. While it may take time and energy to get it up and going today, yourself 3 years from now will thank you in huge ways. So here's what's going to happen, and I'm just going to be completely honest with you. When you start promoting this, the first year what's going to happen is you're going to try and you're going to go, man, that was a lot of work for not a lot of revenue. Okay, I'm telling you this is going to happen. The second year, you're going to do it again. You go, man, that was a lot of work for not a lot of revenue. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to hang on for 3 years, because on that third year, do you know what's going to happen? You are going to have your customers coming into you saying, I'm ready for the off-season service special. What do I need to do to get started? They're coming to you at that point, and that's where we are hitting the jackpot. So that's where we're going to start. This off-season service special is something that we need to be thinking about right now. So when we think about the off-season service special specifically, we need to really start thinking about how we want to promote this about 4 to 6 weeks before we need to see this revenue and this work coming in. Now, when we talk about marketing in general for our dealerships, the rule of thumb is that 4 to 6 weeks before you need to see the sales, we need to be in front of it and marketing it. You know, we were working with a dealership up in the Northeast just recently. As we were walking through this whole process with the off-season service special, they've got kind of an interesting season on their hands. Okay, so they've got about 2 months of really great work that happens in the summer. And then they've got 2 months of really great work that happens in their service department in November, December, where we've got some snow equipment that's getting ready to go out, and we say, okay, let's make sure we've got that ready to go. And so we've got these 2 really interesting pockets of unique work that's coming in. And so here's what we've done with this dealership. We've been working with them for about 3 years on this, which again is our magic number. And so about 3 years ago, we identified these pockets of basically barrenness in their service department. We said, okay, here's when we typically see this in your service department. And again, yours will be unique to your area in your product mix, but everybody has some time that's probably typically slower throughout the year. So we identified this time, and we said about 4 to 6 weeks before we hit this time, here is what we're going to do. We are going to go ahead and we are going to print direct mail pieces that outline our off-season service special. Now, for this dealer, he sells lawn mowers up in the Northeast during the summer, and so he knew that in about now, so late August, early September, things started to slow down for him dramatically with the lawn mowers that he sold. And so he said, we're going to really go after that right now, so that when we get to late September, early October, we've got this stream of revenue coming through our service department where we can pick up cash. We said, okay, we're here for it. Let's see this happen. So we worked with him and his manufacturer to help develop these direct mail pieces that he sent out to his customers. Okay, and now before you come at me with tomatoes about direct mail pieces, let me just have my say. All right, your direct mail pieces, if done correctly, can generate you more revenue for your dealership than just about anything else. All right, hear me out. If we're doing direct mail pieces, we don't just like send a direct mail piece out to 10,000 of our closest friends, cross our fingers and say, oh man, I hope that this works. Hope is not a strategy inside of your dealership. No, hope is not a strategy. So if we're going to send out direct mail pieces, and an example that this dealer did, what he did is he sent out about 100 direct mail pieces each week to his customers who have bought from him before. That's what he did. And on these postcards, with the help of some of his manufacturers, what he did is he outlined what they got in these off-season service specials. For this dealer specifically, here were some of the things he did. He had space for storage. So he offered lawnmower storage throughout the winter. Okay, that's a huge selling factor. He offered the annual service, the parts required for the annual service, and then he offered free pickup and delivery if people called and took advantage of this off-season service special by a certain point. He did a second wave after that where another time cutoff was, and at that point, he still offered the storage. He offered the discount on the annual service and the parts, but he did charge a discounted rate for pickup and delivery. And then he did a third option with a little bit less. But when people sign up by a certain time, they get a better deal the sooner they sign up, because it allows you to take control of what's happening inside of your service department. So you know what, listen, they help you, you help them. That's how this works. But this dealer had done this in about 100 customers each week. And so he would send out these 100 direct mail pieces. And then he had this really phenomenal situation that happened. He then reminded the people at his parts counter that they had bought the premium phone plan. That's right, the premium phone plan. You may have this one too, but it's the phone plan that not only takes calls in, but makes calls out. Oh my goodness, if you need to go check that, that's fine. Go check with your phone carrier. But my guess is you have the premium phone plan too. And so when things were quieter at the parts department, when things were not as busy, he had his parts people pick up the phone, the actual telephone, and have a conversation. He would just have them call the list of customers they sent the direct mail piece to and say, hey, this is ABC dealership, and I just wanted to follow up and make sure that you got the postcard in the mail about our off-season service special. Do you know what percentage of people actually said, you know what, I'd like to go ahead and get my mower serviced and let you take care of it for me over the winter? About 30% that first year. That's right, 30%. And so he was in this place, and then as he was going through this process, he did this with each wave, and as soon as he got to the place where he was at capacity, he shut it down for the rest of the season. It's amazing what this will do. And as they walked through this process, not only did number one, this generate revenue for their service department, good revenue all year long, but it kept their technicians busy. And he was working with us to help implement what we call the full circle dealership. So in the midst of this time that the equipment was in his shop being serviced, as the service manager was calling to give updates on the equipment or whatever it was that they needed to be communicated with, the service manager would then say, hey, I know you've had this unit for 3 years, 5 years. Have you ever thought about upgrading? Where are you at with upgrading? So then in the process of selling the service time, they were starting the process of getting the sales people's funnel full as well, right? Because when we do that, it allows us to pick up revenue all year long in this full circle concept. So here's what we're gonna do. As you sit right now, if you say, you know what, Sarah, the place that I need revenue from more than anything as we move into off-season or slow season is service, I want you to, number one, we're going to identify 100 customers, just start with 100 of them, and we're going to put together a direct mail piece. Talk to your manufacturers. They have incredible resources and marketing teams all there ready to come alongside and help you. And then we're going to send it out to 100 customers. That's what we're going to do. And we're going to pick up the phone, say we're just touching base. Maybe it's a text message. I don't know what it is for you, but I just wanted to make sure that you received this. Is there a good time for me to come pick up your equipment? You're going to ask that question. Is there a good time for me to come pick up your equipment? We're going to have the assumptive close that they're going to say yes. 30% of these people typically will say yes to this, and we are going to bring their equipment in and start servicing it on our time. Again, this creates a better customer experience, not only for you as you're interacting with your customers, but it also allows us to make sure that we are in control of the time in our service department. This is a phenomenal thing, but when you do this the first year, if you do not have instant magical success, keep with it. Like most things inside of your dealership, it will take about 3 years to really get this to a place where your customers are calling you asking for it versus you calling your customers, okay? So that's the first thing we're talking about in regards to generating revenue in our service department. Now, when we talk about processes, what we need to think about is the processes that we can implement to help reduce uncertainty in our service department. And the first one, if I were to say we have one process that is our magic button that will create things to happen in ways that you never would imagine, it would be called triaging equipment. Now, triaging equipment is the equivalent of paramedics at an accident site. When you have a piece of equipment come into your service department, we work with the dealerships to make sure that within 24 hours, less than 24 hours, that every piece of equipment that has been brought into your service department is looked at by a technician who will be working on it. that we've got parts orders starting, and that the customer is contacted back again. Okay, so that's what happens. The piece of equipment is dropped off, and then within 24 hours, I'm going to say it one more time, we've got a technician looking at this piece of equipment that they're going to be working on. We've got the parts moving to the parts department, and we're back in contact with the actual customer. What kind of headache would that relieve for you in your service department if you had every customer touched again within 24 hours of when they drop their equipment off? It'd be insane, insane. So now you say, maybe Sarah, I need more information. I don't know necessarily how to get started with triage. Okay, so after this webinar, our team here at Bob Clement International is going to send out an additional 30-minute training on help. Where do I start with the service department? And we are going to go through specifically how you can implement this triaging process and how you get your people clocking in and clocking out of work orders more effectively, so that you can be sure that we've got these processes in place, because now more than ever, now is the time for you to really dive in and say, let's get these processes in the service department fine-tuned. Because like I said, uncertainty breeds chaos, and chaos costs you money. So the things that you can do is put these processes in place. I also want you to think for just a second, what kind of impact would it have on the relationships between service and parts if that your parts department had a 3-day notice or heads up for any parts, for the most part, that they would need from the service department? What would that be like? For most of the dealerships, it would be a game changer, because there's already this tension. You know, your service manager says, you know what? I need this part tomorrow. Why can't you just overnight it? And this parts department can overnight it. But as we're walking through this, it's so incredibly important to have that communication, because again, incredible communication brings clarity, and it allows us as owners and managers to make sure that we have the least amount of chaos inside of our dealership. So if I had one magic button that would happen that would actually help you implement processes, it would be triage in your service department. There is nothing else that would be more of an impactful thing. So when we have this piece of equipment come in, we typically set aside 1 hour of time for these technicians to look at this equipment and do a quick diagnostic. We build this in through flat rating so that it is a cost neutral time for us, because we're not going to actually spend money or time on something that we're not being paid for. So it's going to be cost neutral through flat rating. And we typically in the middle of season do it an hour before lunch and an hour before the end of the day. Okay, so that's what we typically do during regular season. Now, during slow season, we typically do it an hour before lunch. You go, Sarah, why would you do it an hour before lunch? Because your technicians have someplace they'd like to be. That's right, and it's not inside your dealership when it becomes new. No, they want to be having lunch. And so we want to have them be effective and focused, and we want them to get through these pieces of equipment quickly and effectively for us. So that's what we're going to do in regards to the processes in the midst of slow season. That's where we're going to start, in the processes in our service department. All right, let's talk about parts for just a few minutes. Now, if in our service department, that is the backbone of our dealership, when that's out of line, everything else is a little bit out of line too. Our parts department is the lifeblood that is flowing through the dealership. All right, think about it for just a second. Is there any part of your dealership that the parts department does not touch? My guess is probably not. You know, probably 50 to 60% of the dealerships we work with, the parts department is the first point of contact for customers walking into the door, okay? So from the moment when a customer walks in until they exit and leave with what they need, most interact with the parts department. So if the service department is our backbone, the parts department is the lifeblood that touches every single department. We could not run our dealership without parts. I know some of you are like, okay, Sarah, that's great. Right now, it feels like we are struggling to get parts. So help me understand how I'm supposed to be running a dealership. Listen, again, we've got to give grace to our manufacturers, because they are doing the best they can right now with the parts. But when we're looking at this and looking at this strategy in particular, we are going to look at 2 key things. For cash flow, we are focusing on our parts burn down right now. Okay, that's where we're going to start for cash flow. And then for our processes, we are going to laser focus in on our inventory integrity. All right, so that's where we're going to start as we talk about our parts department. Now, when we talk about our parts inventory burn down, here is what I want you to know. If we want to do this thing called parts inventory burn down, which in the simplest form is a way that we are able to take parts inventory we have sitting on our shelves right now and turn it into cash. I have never met any employee inside of a dealership who said, you know what, I understand cash is tight, so I'll just take parts in lieu of a paycheck. Oh, heavens. If you've got an employee like that, congratulations, but I have not met any people inside of a dealership who are like, I'll just take parts in lieu of my paycheck. It's really not a big deal. No. When slow season hits and you go, okay, I know we just had the best year we've ever had in our history of our dealership, but where do I find this cash at now? Because while it says I have a whole lot of profit, my bank account doesn't say the same thing. One of the biggest places that you have cash tied up is in your parts inventory. And so if you want to free up cash in your parts department right now, we've got to start thinking through how we burn down our parts inventory. The first thing that you need to keep in mind is that now is the time to start this burn down, okay? You know, honestly, in most cases, it was probably about 30 to 45 days ago when we should have been starting this burn down, because at the peak of our season is when we start burning down parts. Our ultimate goal is to have 30% of the parts in inventory that you had at the peak of season, okay? 30% in inventory that you had at the peak of season is what our goal is. What would happen in your dealership if you got rid of 70% of the parts and you had that in the form of cash instead of parts? What kind of burden would that lift for you in your dealership and in your parts department? It would probably be huge. It'd probably be like most of our dealers, it would be a huge burden. You go, but Sarah, what if we need parts? What if we need more parts? How do we go about that? Well, there's this really great invention called the internet in your manufacturers who are able to help continue the flow of parts to your dealership all year long. That's right. With 3 days notice on just about any part, they can get it to you, regardless of where you are around the world. So we're going to say, let's move to this place where we don't have as much urgency on these repairs. It's not like we're in the middle of cutting season. We've got landscapers coming in and out. We're going to start moving these parts mins and maxes down. We're not going to just trust that our software is going to do this for us. No, we are going to go in and we are going to start methodically moving the mins and maxes down on our parts so that we're at about 30% of where we were during peak season. The other thing that this allows you to do with this extra cash, other than not go into your line of credit, which sounds like a great deal, not actually have to try to haggle with your people on taking parts in lieu of a paycheck, but the other thing that it allows you to do is that as you go to your manufacturer's meetings, whether they're virtual or in person this year, it allows you to take advantage of their parts ordering program and utilize their parts dating. Now, I just want to be clear. Parts dating is not an app to help you be romantically connected to other parts people. Okay, that's not what parts dating is. But parts dating allows you to utilize their money to help pay for the parts that you have in your inventory. Beautiful. That is a beautiful thing. But you can't do that if your parts inventory is at 100% of where it was during peak season. So as an owner or a parts manager, here is what I want you to do. If you have not already started to do this, I want you to go in and we're going to start burning down our parts inventory now, adjusting our mins and maxes in our software so that when we get to the point where season is over for us, we only have 30% of the inventory that we had during peak season. All right. Now is the time to do this. We've got to start moving forward through this, but it will free up cash flow for you as you move into a more uncertain time of the year, and it will allow you to take advantage of some of your manufacturer's programs. Now, if that's what we're looking at with cash flow in the parts department, we've got to ask the question, what's the process that we need to focus on? Now, for most dealerships that we work with, the most overlooked process has to do with the inventory of your parts department. Here's what my question is. Here's a great litmus test to see how your parts department inventory integrity is right now. Let's say that I was a parts customer and I was needing a part from you. I called into the parts department and I talked to Billy behind the parts counter. Hey Billy, how you doing? And I say, hey Billy, I am in need of this part and I am 60 miles away. Based on what your software says right now, what would be the likelihood? And your software says that you have 2 in stock, okay? I call Billy. Billy says, it says we got 2 in stock. How confident would you be to have Billy say, come on in when I'm 60 miles away without going back and putting his hand on the part? How confident would you be? All right, let's say that you say, you know what? I wouldn't be confident at all, Sarah. I wouldn't even be confident that I have 1 of that part if it says that I have 2 of it in stock on my business management software. That means that if you're not even confident you have 1, that 50% of your parts inventory is off. That's huge. That's huge. And so we've got to make sure that our parts inventory integrity is a process that we're focusing on as we move into slow season in our parts department. The thing that we all know, and maybe we've never put words behind it before, is this, that the biggest disruptor of your parts inventory integrity is the people who don't work in the parts department, namely technicians. Technicians who come into your parts department to grab parts because they're in the middle of the job, they just need some parts real quick so they can finish their job, is the #1 single greatest disruptor of parts inventory integrity. #1. And you didn't need me to tell you that. You probably already knew that, but you're so often get in this mess of rush inside the parts department and you get this stocking order and you're doing like this weird stocking order dance because nobody has time to put it away, and you as a parts manager or an owner are neglecting this bank vault full of gold bars, and you're saying, come on in. Anybody's welcome into my bank vault. And then slowly but surely, the inventory integrity starts getting off. I was working with one parts manager just recently in one of our parts trainings that we were going through. We were having this conversation around parts inventory integrity. As I was talking with her, she said, you know what? I have seen this firsthand. Over the last few months, we decided to take back control of our parts inventory integrity. This is a mid-sized tractor dealership with 2 locations here in Missouri. And she said, you know what, we looked at it, we had really not paid attention to this over the last 3 years. And so we went back through, we did an inventory check, and we realized that over the last 3 years, we lost over $100,000 worth of parts from our parts inventory because we were not guarding the bank vault. It is your job as a parts manager to guard the bank vault. Unless somebody works in the parts department or they are a manager in the dealership, they are not allowed to come behind the parts counter for any reason. There's absolutely no reason, because that is the single greatest disruptor of your parts inventory integrity. All right, so you say, Sarah, I'm like this girl in this first story you just told, that we have not actually touched our inventory. We just order it as we need it. When the service department says they need something, we just go ahead and order 2 of it because that makes sense. That sounds like a good strategy. That is not a good strategy. But as we do this is how our parts inventory gets off base. And so how do you reclaim the inventory integrity of your parts department? #1, keep technicians out of your parts department. Okay, I said it before, but I'm going to say it again. That is the single greatest disruptor of your parts department integrity of the inventory. Because again, a technician will come in and they'll say, you know what? I need this part to finish this job. They'll grab the part out of the stocking order that's sitting on the ground that nobody had the time to put away. They'll take it, they'll put it on the equipment, and then they just happen to forget that they needed to put that on the work order too. So the customer doesn't even end up paying for it. Was the technician trying to steal from you? Probably not. My guess is no. But they just got busy, and you did not have processes in place to make sure that the inventory integrity stayed in place. All right, so that's the first thing. If we want to reclaim the integrity of the inventory in your parts department, keep people who are not in the parts department out of the parts department. #2, hire a parts support specialist. Right, the parts support specialist is a low-level person that we hire at most dealerships that we work with. This is typically a parent who has kids in school who wants to come into the dealership part-time. We typically let them come in around 10 and leave by 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And when they come in, they have one overarching focus in the parts department, and that is to put away the stocking order. That's right. That's their number one focus in the parts department, is to come in and put away the stocking order so that when we need to move parts out, we know they were in the right place to begin with. The other thing that they do as soon as the stocking order is done is they start taking the parts that the technicians told you they needed during triage and moving them towards the service department. Okay, that's how we keep the technicians out, is we have this low-level person who is sitting here not only putting away the stocking order for us, but also moving the parts to the service department that they need. They're also there making sure that the parts that they're sending to the service department are getting onto the work orders. All right, you go, Sarah, that's all good and well, but how in the world do I actually pay for this person? I have heard Bob say before that we don't actually add anybody to the dealership. That's the last thing we want to do. You probably heard his terrible joke. What's the worst thing to add to a dealership is a body. Because what's the hardest thing to get rid of? A body. Ask anyone who's ever killed somebody, what's the hardest thing to get rid of? A body, okay? That's a terrible dad joke. I'll leave that up to my dad to say that. But as we look at this, inside of your dealership, the only time that we hire and bring somebody on is when either, number one, they're going to generate us additional revenue, okay? So we are at max capacity and we need additional revenue, and we know bringing on another person to this is going to help us do that. Or number two, that they are cost neutral to our dealership, okay? Those are the two times we bring somebody into our dealership as a new employee. We're maxed out on capacity, and we know that if we bring another person on, they can increase the revenue coming through, or number two, they're cost neutral. We make this person, this part support specialist, cost neutral to our dealership by adding an extra 5% on all parts that we sell to ourselves. Okay, that's what we're going to do. When we add an extra 5% on all parts that we sell through our service department, we are able to make this person cost neutral. Now, depending on your business management system, if you're running business management system, most of them have a button in there that you are able to simply click, and it will add an extra 5% to all the parts that you sell to your service department. Now, we typically cap this 5% when we hit $100 worth of value in a part. So when a part equals $100, we stop that 5%. We have been working with thousands of dealerships all across the world on this 5%. And do you know how many times I've ever had a dealership come to me and say, Sarah, I got pushed back on that 5%? Zero. Zero times. How many? And we have dealerships who are actually up to 11% that they charge to their service department on all the parts they sell to themselves. That's how we make this part support specialist cost neutral to us. The third thing I would encourage you to do is move to a cyclical inventory count of your parts department. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. We are, again, if you have business management software, you should have the ability to print off a report once a day where you can touch a handful of parts and do a cyclical inventory count. So it doesn't mean you shut down your dealership for a whole entire week or 2 weeks in some cases to do an inventory count. But no, you are doing this inventory count so that you know with fact that all of your parts have been touched at least once over the course of the year. And when we have our technicians out of the parts department and we have this part support specialist who's keeping it up to date and moving for us, it allows us to regain this inventory integrity that we so desperately need in our parts department. Okay, so if you don't do anything else in your parts department over the course of slow season, this is where I want you to start. I want you to say, where is my inventory integrity at right now? And what do I need to do in order to take back control of that inventory integrity? All right, the third department we're going to talk about in our last department is our whole goods. All right, so our whole goods is the apple tree that allows you to pick up additional revenue for parts and service. The reason that we sell whole goods is not because we get the best margins that we've ever seen. Oh heavens, you all know that's probably not true. We typically see an OPE in compact tractors. We probably see most of our dealers in that 20% OPE and maybe that 14 to 17 in compact tractor world. But as we look at that, when we look at parts, most of our dealerships, their profit margins on their parts in OPE and compact are anywhere between that 48 and 52. We have a few dealers in OPE who are up in that 57, 58% range on parts. And then in your service department, your profit margin on that is typically about 55 to 60%. And so we're not selling whole goods because we're real excited about the profit margin. We're selling whole goods because we know that the more apple trees we plant, we're not planting apple trees for shade. No, we're planting apple trees so that we can have grandma make us some apple pie. Okay, listen, I'm from Missouri. We love some good apple pie. And so that's why we're planting apple trees, because we know that we can eventually pick these apples and actually make it so that we are picking up additional revenue in parts and service. So let's go through two really quick things that we can do in whole goods to make sure that we are picking up this revenue. The first thing in cash flow is the power of a blowout sale. Okay, so this is going to be the first thing we're going to talk about. Now, I get it. Inside of your dealership, you may say, Sarah, are you aware that in most of the country, inventory is hard to come by right now in most green industries? No, I know, but here's the thing. I don't know how much inventory you have sitting on your lot, but maybe it's used equipment. Maybe it's equipment that you have had floor plan go up on and you're starting to pay interest on. I want you to make the commitment to start moving anything that is not sitting there that you're not paying interest on off your lot. That's what I want you to do. We were just working with a dealership up in Illinois recently. They sell compact tractors, and they had $40,000 worth of used tractors on their lot. So they had $40,000, and it had just come up off floor plan, so they were starting to pay interest on it. And so what did we tell them to do? We said, let's move these tractors, because as a result, we are just going to try to break even on this. Because it's not worth it for you to necessarily keep putting money into something that's not going to generate you more revenue right now inside your dealership. I need you to free up this cash, because we are all aware that your manufacturers are busting their rears to make sure that as we come into next year, there is going to be more inventory for you. Are you aware that your manufacturers are going above and beyond right now to make sure that there is no shortage of inventory? They're going to have another option for you to buy some more, okay? So if we have inventory on our lot right now, we want to convert that as much as we can into cash. Again, that's what we do to minimize uncertainty, move things into cash. Cash flow is king. So even if that means that we need to sell it at a break-even point, we're going to, because once it actually comes off of floor plan and we have to start paying interest on the unit, we no longer want that on our floor. That's where it is. Now, how do you do this? How do you do a blowout sale in the midst of everything that's going on? Well, there's some really incredible options out there, but in the auto industry, there is a website called Sale in a Box, S-A-L-E in a box. Now, what this is, and I think the most expensive package they have is like $1,500, but they have all of the components so that you can have all of the marketing materials you need to do a blowout sale, okay? They've already got it all done for you. So we're just going to say our focus is to turn any inventory we are paying interest on or used inventory we are just sitting on into cash flow for our dealership. That's what we're going to do to generate cash in our sales for our whole goods. Now, what does the process portion of this look like for whole goods? How do we keep leads coming in all winter long? Here's what we do. When we're working with a dealership, we require inside salespeople we work with to interact with a minimum of 20 customers a day. So we require all salespeople that we work with inside of a dealership that they have an activity requirement. So 20 a day is the minimum that a salesperson needs to touch to be able to keep their job if they're an inside salesperson. If they're an outside salesperson, the number is 6. Okay, 20 for inside, 6 for outside, because it takes a little longer to interact with sales on the outside salespeople. So when we have a salesperson and how we keep this process moving is we say, it's up to you, oh wonderful salesperson, to decide how much you want to make as a weekly base. If you commit as a salesperson to doing 20 touches a day, you will be guaranteeing yourself a $400 weekly base in your bonus, or as your base for your salesperson. If they commit to 30 touches a day, we're looking at a $500 weekly base. And if they commit to 40 touches a day, they're looking at a $600 weekly base. We typically let them decide that for 2 weeks, and then we go back and check in and see how things are going. We don't just blindly say, okay, you chose 40, $600 a week. That's it. That's what you're doing. No, they've got to actually turn this information into you. So a touch, though, or an interaction can be anything from an email, a text message, a phone call, a person, whole minivan of family coming in saying, I need to use the bathroom. I don't care what it is, but I know that if I want a salesperson to be successful, the minimum they have to touch every single day as an inside salesperson is 20. And again, in the outside salesperson, we're looking at 6, 8, and 10. Those are the numbers for us to hit those different bases in outside. All right, so we've got this activity requirement, but you say, Sarah, we're going into slow season. How in the world do I find leads for these salespeople who need to touch 20, 30, or 40 people a day? Here's what I tell you. If you have a CRM, the easiest place to find leads for your salespeople is just within your CRM that you already have. I want you to pull up your CRM, and I want you to look for any customer who has touched and purchased from you in the last 5 to 7 years. All right, that's the number I want you to look at. Pull up this CRM, and you're going to be surprised by the amount of customers that have bought from you in the last 5 to 7 years. Why is it that that's the number we're looking for? Well, a few things happen when we hit that 5 to 7 year mark. Number one, most of the time, if they finance their unit, it's already paid off. Okay, so they've paid it off. They're ready for something sexy, exciting, and new to come in. Number two, if they have done this, their warranty is probably up and expired at this point. So they're ready to trade it in and get something new. We were working with a dealership in Mississippi just a few years ago. They had a brand new salesperson come into their dealership as an inside salesperson. Up until this point, the owner was the salesperson for the dealership as well, probably like many of you. Okay, so they bring in their very first salesperson. The owner calls Bob up and says, Bob, how do I get them started? This is a big investment for me to bring in the salesperson. For all them to do is just to sell. He said, okay, here's what I want you to do. The same thing I'm telling you right now. I want you to open up your CRM, and I want you to pull a list of anybody who bought from you in the last 5 to 7 years. And I want you to have this salesperson pick up the phone and say, hi, my name is Jim with ABC Dealership, and I'm new here. The owner asked me to give you a call and see if there was anything we could help you with. He just took that list of people who bought from the last 5 to 7 years and started making these calls to them. You know what happened to this compact tractor dealer, the salesperson who started his very first year in sales by just calling that list? Over the course of the year, he sold over $1 million of tractors by only utilizing the list of people who bought from that dealership in the last 5 to 7 years. Because they go, oh, you know what, we were just talking about it. We were just thinking about that. Me and my wife, me and my husband, we were just thinking about it. It's just about time for us to get a new tractor. Just luck that you called. Oh, no, it's not luck. It's not hope. We have a strategy in place. And so if your people are going, we don't have leads, I don't know where to start, here's what I want you to do. Open up your CRM and pull the list of people who bought from you in the last 5 to 7 years and say, just pick up the phone, not a hard sale, just check in and see how they're doing. So I just want to encourage you, as we move forward from here, you've got to keep in mind you can't do this all. If you were to go back to your dealership after this webinar, you go, I went to this phenomenal webinar today, and I heard all of these things that we're going to implement before slow season, your people are going to have death threats out on me. They're going to say, all right, who was this person who was talking to you, and what does she know? Because she sounds like she's making my life a crazy place to be, okay? That's not what we're going to do. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to think through the things that we talked about for parts, for service, and for whole goods, and I want you to pick the easiest. That's right. I want you to pick the easiest thing that you can start implementing so that you can start generating more revenue and increasing profits and processes in each of those departments, and start there. It's okay to hit the easy button. It's okay to say, we're going to start with something easy, and then we are going to continue to go from there. You will see that momentum will happen as you continue down this path. You start with something easy. You're going to get this momentum. You're going to go, okay, I'm ready for the next thing. You're going to get that. You're going to feel like you are winning and knocking it out of the park. You're going to go to the next thing, your people are going to start getting excited. And as a result, you are going to walk through the end of slow season without uncertainty, but you're going to walk through with cash and with processes that are going to make you better as you go into your next busy season. All right, Kim, I know I saw a few questions popping through and we just have a minute or so left. So let's see if we can get through a few of them.
Yeah, so we do only have about that minute left. So I did want to ask at least one of these. For those on the webinar who have been doing this for, 30, 40 years and are doing a lot of these best practices, what are some of the, most out of the box kind of ideas you've seen dealers you work with do in the off season to kind of keep things going strong?
Yeah, so I would say some of the things that we're seeing right now, Kim, number one, I mean, as silly as it is, going back to the basics is a huge thing right now. Let's just go back to the basics. But in parts, we're seeing a lot of our dealers we're working with going to more of a parts on demand program for some of their high volume customers. And the off season is a great time to get that set up. So that's where we take a cabinet, fill it with parts that some of our high volume or commercial customers will need. And then we go check on that parts cabinet about every 2 weeks to every month. And we have a salesperson go check on that. The dealers we have who are implementing a parts on demand program or a consignment parts program see typically on average an increase of $1,000 per month per cabinet they have out. So that's one thing. If you're saying, okay, how do we do this? I've got the basics in place. My inventory integrity is there. That's where I would start with that if you're ready for the next level. Or even saying, let's make sure that we are maximizing our retail space in our showroom and making sure that in our parts department and our software, we have a bin location for all of the end caps, and we can track the kind of revenue that is being produced by bin location in our showroom. It's what Walmart does, what Target does when you go through that aisle. They say, I know you probably don't think you need a Diet Coke, but you do now. And they know exactly how much is being generated with that. In service, we are seeing dealers we work with go to this strategy of saying, let's make sure that we have reoccurring revenue coming in all year long. So we're doing things like where they will opt in for their annual service over the course of the year, and we'll break that up into reoccurring monthly revenue. So that's one of the things, or a loaner program in a very similar fashion. And then as we're talking about sales specifically, we're seeing lots going back to the extended warranties and extended service agreements. That's what we're seeing a lot of. But we're also going back to saying, let's make sure that in sales, we're negotiating and training our people right now to negotiate with parts and service instead of cash, because parts and service have about a 50%-ish margin on it, and cash's margin is 100%. So, Kim, that was a really long answer to your short question, but in each department, there is that next level thing that we say, okay, we've got the basics, we feel like we've got that under control, let's move to the next piece.
Okay, and then if anyone wants to send you a question, is there a email address that they can contact you at?
Yeah, absolutely. My personal email address is just Sara, S-A-R-A, at bobclements.com. We're from Missouri. We've got to keep it simple, Kim. So just Sara, S-A-R-A, at bobclements.com.
Okay, that would be great. That way we don't have time to get to all the questions, but feel free to reach out to Sara if you have additional questions for her. All right, well, that is all the time we have. The presentation and audio will be available on the Rural Lifestyle Dealer website in case you want to go back and review it, or have anyone else at the dealership take a look as well. Keep an eye out on your email and the Rural Lifestyle Dealer newsletter for more information. On behalf of Sara, BCI, and the Rural Lifestyle Dealer staff, thank you for joining us for today's webinar. When you leave the webinar, you'll be directed to a short survey. Please let us know what you thought of the event and if there's any topics you'd like us to cover in the future. Thanks again, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks.